Man, just when you think it can't get any cringier than EA's E3 conference from last year, EA turns to us and says, "Hold my beer," and we're like, "No, EA, you're already the cringiest one." And they're like, "Oh, you think you know cringe? We'll show you cringe." Somehow, they manage to keep topping themselves. It almost seems intentional at this point. So once again, let's run through this nightmare. It kicked off with a weird AR sort of tease for Anthem. Was this for a VR function, or because 3D TVs are making a comeback? No, just random nonsense. Then cut to our first gaming industry influencer. Now, I'll give this girl credit. We'll call her Red. I think she did the best with what she was given, honestly. Certainly not the worst, but on an EA stage, how is it hard to not be the worst? But she was put in some tough spots, which we'll get into later. And honestly, this whole thing goes downhill right off the bat. So first up was Battlefield V for Vagina, which will have, brace yourselves, a Battle Royale mode. I know. Who could have seen that coming? Really, they're really innovating with this title, aren't they? But we really didn't see any significant new gameplay. A theme of this show. Just a montage trailer of sorts with footage rendered in-engine, which really doesn't mean much to me at this point. This is the time to really show off these games with gameplay, especially the ones that have already been announced. And why do you think I want more story teases for a freaking Battlefield game? That's like all we've gotten at this point for Battlefield 5. Then we moved on to FIFA, and the cringe began to pick up. Another theme of the show, obviously. Not only just not showing gameplay, but not showing gameplay while random people just stand in front of static images on the screen talking about the game. This was all over the place and really infuriated me. Why do you think we want to see these people? Who are these people? If they have to stand up there and just talk to us for like 20 minutes, why not have gameplay running that you can cut to and show us instead of these people just spouting off and telling us about the game? I have no idea what they were thinking with this stuff. Then we go back to Red, who is sitting in the crowd with Vince Zampella from Respawn, who confirms from the crowd that Respawn is making a new Star Wars game called Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, and he goes on to state that the game will take place between episodes 3 and 4, and you'll be playing as a Jedi. They wanted to make sure to make that very clear. You'll be running around with a lightsaber. Now, this is something I've said in past videos that I was hoping to hear come out of this EA presentation, but I don't get why they did this in such a nonchalant way. From the crowd, especially. When you have a stage, not having this stuff happen on the stage seemed so weird. And they couldn't put together a little teaser or anything. Like, I know the game is far off, not coming until holiday 2019, but they could have done something like what they did with the last canceled Star Wars game that Visceral was making. Even that, just a short clip giving us a taste of what the world will look like, and then hit us with the title card. Especially when everything else on here was so lackluster. That could have been the big moment of the show without taking much effort. But it's EA, what do you expect? Plus, we had another more important Star Wars game to talk about, Battlefront 2. Once again, trailers. Trailers I believe we've already seen for content that's already available. But they did talk about some new stuff, new characters like General Grievous, who I'll admit would probably be cool to play as in this type of game. But did they actually show that? Of course not. Instead, you get to look at this hipster who looked like he literally just crawled out of bed and walked on stage to talk about that character coming. Again, why not show some footage of Grievous running around the map, slicing people with his half-dozen lightsabers? That would have been cool, which means it's not something EA would do. Then there was a small glimmer of hope that this conference might be about to turn around. Yarny Man, the E3 legend, made his grand return to the stage, still extremely nervous, but not to the point of shaking like he was last time. He came to show us Unravel 2. Like the original Unravel, looks great, pretty similar in design, but now it focuses on two-player co-op. Now you'll have two Yarnies tethered together, which offers up a ton of new possibilities for overcoming obstacles and puzzles, and he brought gameplay. Finally, someone got the memo of what we tune into this show for. Definitely interested in this game. And the indies kept going strong with a game I was super intrigued by. This may actually end up going down as one of my top 10 games of the entire show. Granted, we're early, but yeah, I really liked this, especially after watching the footage back again. Sea of Solitude appears to be a puzzle platformer that takes place in this flooded town where your character seems to be suffering from some sort of corruption, taking on this dark form, and the world has sort of a day and night mechanic where at night other monstrous beings come out and start coming after you. I liked everything we saw for this. Granted, it wasn't much, but the character designs, art directions, the whole shebang. Very curious to learn more about this. That creepiness factor just right up my alley. So things were actually starting to look up, which means, of course, EA had to drive them right back into the ground by bringing out the worst of the worst.
It's a big night for young Kiv. He's been stuck at the quarterfinals.
And here he is now in his first championship game, looking to accomplish a goal. 3rd and 4 throws it.
Next up, the Rich Boys. Sports game, esports players, my favorite. The one guy they even show in the hype package being a little crybaby, not shaking people's hands after losing, so you know he's awesome. This segment was a cringe volcano. If you didn't have your H3H3 hazmat suits on while watching this, well, then you're probably no longer with us. These guys were super awkward, but what makes it so cringe, so bad, is that they were trying to act like cool guys while being super awkward.
I chased that money. I still got my diploma, but I chased that money.
There you go. We're out here chasing money.
I chase that money. We're out here chasing money.
Who the hell cares? Seriously, the only time I ever hear about Madden esports is during these E3 conferences. I surely won't hear about them for another year. So why are you delegating so much time to listening to these guys dish about chasing that money, giving their origin stories? This was the biggest waste of time. Or was it? Because then we got the return of Command & Conquer, the classic RTS franchise, which is a good genre, by the way, if you didn't know.
Nice little strategy game for those of you out there. It's a good genre. I'm very excited for this. The players are loading in, and we are ready to
the
kick
match. Here we go.
this off as the players' bases.
And it's coming back in the form of a mobile game. That's right, get hype, and if you're wondering what it will play like, don't worry, because they played an entire match, complete with broadcast announcers. Of all the games you have, EA, this is the one you decided we need to sit down and watch an entire match of. You see, this is the kind of stuff where it feels honestly like EA is trolling us. Who could have ever thought this would be a good idea? I don't think it's possible. Just 15 minutes or whatever of non-stop cringe as we watched the game, oftentimes through cameras focusing on the players' smartphones, and listening to these commentators desperately trying to make it sound like what we were watching was at all interesting.
This missile is very, very close to firing. Let's see what's going to happen.
With another turret, in control flanks, he takes the top, that missile,
And that
fires off.
Wow.
And Nick at Night, one shot away from being knocked out here.
I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah.
Then Andrew Wilson came back out to remind us how charitable, how generous a business EA is. Did I mention they give to charity and are charitable? What a joke. You're objectively one of the worst companies in the world. It's been voted on. It's been decided by the people. Everyone knows it. Trying to push this BS, it doesn't help you in the slightest. If anything, it makes you look worse. It makes you look desperate to try to help out your image. And that led us into the big, quote, deep dive for Anthem that we had all been waiting for. Some creators of the game were paraded out on stage with Red. I thought maybe they were going to play it live. That'd be nice. Nope, we're going to do what EA does. Sit around and talk about the game in front of static screenshots, most of which were labeled as concept art. Yes, let's be clear. We're looking at concept art for a game that we saw gameplay for last year. So they talked a bit about the classes that'll be in the game. You know, surprise, this game's going to have classes like a lot of these other games like Destiny and that, in which they showed very small cuts of gameplay. I know they showed some trailer footage that we already saw as well. Even when Red came out, she was like, oh, isn't it cool to see that trailer again? Yeah, I guess. But finally, after they dragged ass for God knows how long, we got the new stuff. But even that, I thought was pretty weak. I expected that we were going to get a long piece of uninterrupted gameplay, like walking us through an entire mission or something. This still seemed more trailer-esque. They tried to play it off more like we were seeing something fluid, but it was mostly just cuts between different characters shooting things. And at this point, I want to see more than that. And of course, they teased us with some sort of potentially cool boss fight at the very end, right before they cut it. They should have showed us that. I'm sure there will be people saying they loved this, but I'm not feeling it. Like I said when this game was first revealed a few years ago, maybe I'd be hyped for what we've seen so far, but in a post-Division, post-Destiny world, games that promised us much of the same, a big open world for you to explore with your friends and do narratively driven quests and whatnot, and both of those games were extremely disappointing. Not to mention, I got some red flags when the one woman on stage mentioned that they planned on releasing content for years to come. Nothing wrong with that in itself, but these days, talking about that tends to more often mean we're not going to ship the game with much content, and instead we'll just talk about all the stuff we're going to add later. As far as this being the big EA game of the next year or so, yeah, not exactly blowing me away. They did say the game isn't going to have loot boxes or microtransactions that have anything to do with power. It sounds like it'll be strictly cosmetic, which is good, but that's more like what I expect. I'm not going to be sucked into this game where it's like, oh, since we keep throwing loot boxes and microtransactions at you so hard, you're supposed to cheer when we don't do it. No, I expect that. Just because it sucks when you do it doesn't mean I'm going to praise you when you don't do it. But with this one, maybe as we start to see people's gameplay from, actually playing it on the show floor, I'll feel different. But right now, just not feeling it. So essentially, to close this out, I really liked the indie stuff they showed. Everything else was either meh or a complete cringe fest. Somehow EA continues to disappoint us more year after year. The one positive thing about this conference, specifically about it kicking off E3, is things can only get better from here. And with that, this video's a wrap. Let me know your thoughts on EA's E3 press conference in the comments. Don't forget, tomorrow I will be streaming Microsoft's presentation live at 4 p.m. Eastern, so come hang out with us if you can, crossing my fingers for some perfect dark. As always, I'm John Zakari, and thanks for watching.